Hi guys, Mark here. Welcome. So in this video, we're going to be doing a fancy style of a self-defense lanyard, which can also be adapted into a get-back whip. Now this is not the easiest of projects, so I definitely recommend attempting the various techniques here individually before going into the entire project. It's going to be a challenge, but something that you can be proud of after completing the whole thing. The business end is made out of a pool ball covered with a 4-pass globe knot. Now you can make this project in a variety of different colors, so here I have one in 3 distinct colors. Mix and match your colors as you wish. After the globe knot, we have an 8-stranded star knot. Next, a 4-stranded diamond knot with the gaucho pattern. Then an 8-stranded gaucho braid, a 2-pass foot rope knot, another 4-stranded diamond knot with the gaucho pattern, and finally for the handle we have an 8-stranded flat braid. So that's our project. You can modify it as you wish, skip certain knots, replace knots, mix and match colors. It really is up to you. We begin our work by cutting 4 strands of Paracord 550, each is 16 feet long. I'm then going to grab one of my strands, measure out a length of 4 feet, then coil that length to keep it out of the way. I'm going to do the same thing with 2 more strands. So the next one again, 4 feet. Coil the length to keep it out of the way. Then 1 more strand, again 4 feet. Coil the length. Like this. So in total we have 3 coils like this. We're going to grab one of our cords, grab the very end, get our globe knot mandrel. As you can see, the rows here are marked A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Rows C, D, E, F are sticking out. And we have our columns column 1, 2, 3, 4, a rubber band, and that's our globe knot mandrel. I'm going to grab my working end, place it near C1, pull my end all the way through, like this, and grab a lacing needle. So, with our cord, lacing needle, and globe knot mandrel, we are ready for our first knot, the globe knot. We begin tying our globe knot at C1. From C1, we pass to E3, then from E3, we move to D4. From D4, we pass to F2, then from F2, we pass under 1, reaching C4. From C4, we pass to E2, then from E2 we pass over 1, reaching D3. From D3 we are going to pass under, then over, reaching F1. From F1 we are going to pass over, then under 2, reaching C3. From C3, we are going to travel the opposite to our previous strand, so over under, reaching E1. From E1, we again travel the opposite to our previous strand, so under, then over 2, reaching D2. From D2, we are going to travel the opposite to our previous strand, so under over, under over, reaching F4. From F4, we are going to travel over, then under, over, then under 2, reaching C2. From C2, we are going to travel the opposite to our previous strand. So, over, under, over, under, reaching E4. From E4, we travel the opposite to our previous strand. So, under, then over, under, over, reaching D1. From D1, we travel the opposite to our previous strand. So, under, over, under, over, under, reaching F3. From F3, we are at our final pass. We are going to travel the opposite to our previous strand. So, over, under, over, under, over, under. Reaching our starting point, so C1. Place your working hand alongside the standing hand. So under 1. Then for now, we are going to place our working hand under the rubber band. The next step is to grab our next strand pass it under the rubber band alongside our first standing hand. Attach your lacing needle, then double up your knot. So this is super easy, just follow the standing hand through the knot, doubling it up. When the knot is doubled up, place your working end next to the standing end of your second cord. Then place your working end under the rubber band, just to keep it out of the way. Now, before transferring our knot onto the cord, we're going to triple it up. Grab your third cord, pass it under the rubber band on either side of the first two cords. So in my case, let's say on this side now. So on the right one. Triple up your knot, following the first two passes as we did before. With the third pass done, we again place the working end of our third cord next to the standing end of our third cord. We pass the end under the rubber band effectively tripling up our knot. I'm next going to sink in all of my screws so that I can transfer my knot onto a cord. We continue by removing our rubber band, unraveling our coils, then removing our mandrel, placing a cord into our globe knot. Then we begin tightening up. Initially, I do this 3 strands at a time. So in my case, pulling on the standing ends, removing slack through the knot into the working ends. So just gradually remove slack . So this was one pass of tightening. I'm going to do at least one more pass before I work in my fourth strand into the knot. For now, try to even out your 6 strands. So maybe this set is longer, so work your slack into the other set, or if this set is longer, work the slack into the other set, just to try to even out the strands as much as you can. A bit more tightening, then we continue. After tightening up our first 3 passes, we're going to add one more in order to fill in the gaps in our knot, as well as tighten it up a bit further. I'm going to place my new cord alongside a set of ends, and I'm going to even out the new standing end to the other 3. I then simply follow the first 3 passes through the knot, adding in my 4th pass. With our 4-pass globe knot done, it's time to move on to the next knot. In our case, the star knot. The star knot looks great, but it is optional. You can choose to skip it and move directly into the gaucho braid. Up to you. Star knot or gaucho braid. We begin our star knot with a series of loops. Create a loop using one of your ends. Grab the next end, create the same kind of a loop. Pass the second end through the first loop, like this. So essentially, the second end is passing under 2. Grab the next end, repeat. So a loop, pass the end through the previous loop. Simple, it just takes time. So the next end, loop, pass the end through the previous loop. Each end, when done, passes under 2. Loop, pass through the previous loop. Loop, pass through the previous loop. Remember, each end passes under 2. Loop, pass through the previous loop. Our final end through the previous loop. Find your first end, pass the end under and through the final loop, completing your circle. So, a circle of loops. I'm just going to tighten up a little bit, then we continue with the next step. The next step is a crown knot in the counterclockwise direction. Simply grab one of the ends, pass it counterclockwise over the next end. Then the next end again passes counterclockwise over the next end. The next end again counterclockwise over the next end. Do this with all of your ends, simply passing counterclockwise over the next end. The result is going to be an octagon shape Our final end is going to pass under our first end, creating our octagon shape. Tighten up a little bit, just to see if the pattern is correct. Like this. The next step is to grab one of your ends. Doesn't matter where you start. And you double up the next end in the clockwise direction. So on its inner side, double it up and travel into the seam loop where the next end is coming from. Position your new loop above the one below it. So we now have two loops on the sides. We grab our next end, repeat. We double up the next end in the clockwise direction, placing our new loop above the first one, and travel into the seam loop where our next end is coming from. Do this with all of your ends. Next end, same thing. At some point, when we pass into the loop, we're going to pass into 2 loops, since those are already doubled up. Our final strand, completing the top of the star knot. We now switch to the bottom side. Each of our ends is going to pass over 2. So over this strand here, and over a strand coming out of the globe knot. So over 2, essentially doubling up this section here, and passing our working end to the top of the star knot. Do this with all of your strands. So you grab the next one, you pass it over 2, over this strand, and over a strand coming out of the globe knot. Then up through the center of the star knot, doubling up this section here. Next, and same thing. Over 2, up through the center. With all of our ends at the top of the star knot yet again, our star knot is complete. To tighten it up, we start with a strand coming out of the globe knot. We pull the slack through the knot, into one of the ends. Do this with all 8 of your strands. So you grab one coming out of the globe knot, you run the slack through the knot into one of the ends. When doing braiding, I often secure my work into a loop placed onto a door handle, so like this, to hold my work while I'm doing my braid. For the gaucho braid, we separate our strands into 2 sets of 4. we are always braiding using our top strands. The gaucho braid has 4 distinct steps. Step 1. Top right strand passes behind, under 2, over 2, and to the bottom on the right. Step 2. Top left strand passes behind, over, under 2, over, and to the bottom on the left. Step 3. Top right strand passes behind, over 2, under 2, to the bottom on the right. Step 4. Top left strand passes behind, under, over 2, under, to the bottom on the left. Tighten up a bit as much as you can. The start here doesn't really matter since we're going to cover it up. Continue exactly the same way as you did before. So, top right, under 2, over 2, top left, over, under 2, over, top right, over 2, under 2, top left, under, over 2, under, then tighten up. It's not a super simple braid, but once you get used to it, it's not that hard either. So let's do this one more time. Top right, under 2, over 2, top left, over, under 2, over, top right, over 2, under 2, top left, under, over 2, under, then tighten up. I've done about 9, maybe 10 inches of the gaucho braid. I'm now going to switch into a flat braid for the handle. I'm going to split my ends, 5 on the left, 3 on the right. We now do 4 distinct steps. Step 1, top left, under, over 2, under. Step 2, top right, under, over 2. Step 3, top left, over 1, under 2, over 1. Step 4, top right, over 1, under 2. Tighten up a bit. Continue exactly the same way. Top left, under, over 2, under. Top right, under, over 2. Top left, over, under 2, over. Top right, over 1, under 2. Tighten up again. Then continue exactly the same way. You can already see the pattern forming. After braiding my handle, I'm going to split my strands into 2 sets of 4 again. I'm going to fold over my handle, then work my 8 ends into the gaucho braid to lock the handle into place. This is a bit of a messy process, so don't have any particular rules for it, just work the strands into the braid. It doesn't need to look nice, since we're going to cover this worked-in section with a decorative knot. In practice, this is going to be the end result. We can begin at the front or at the back. In this case, I'm going to start at the back, grabbing a strand and following a strand in the braid. So let's say here. Again, there are no real rules, just work your strands into the braid. So this is one going towards the left. The next end is again going to travel towards the left, parallel to the next strand. So let's say here. The next end let's say here. And the final end under here. So we did the 4 ends facing the left. Each end is following a strand in the gaucho braid. Then the ends facing towards the right, same thing. So let's start at the back. Find a strand traveling towards the right side. Simply follow it. The next end, going towards the right side, follows the next strand just above. Next one, again, follows a strand just above. And the final end, a strand above. So this was one pass that locks our handle into place. Pull on all of your strands to really lock that handle. And at this point, what we're going to do is bring 4 ends a bit deeper into our gaucho braid. So these 4 are going to form our foot rope knot, and the back 4 are going to form this gaucho patterned diamond knot. So the first 4 should be at about the same spot in our braid. So this one is at the front, this one is also fine, this one could use one more tuck. So let's say up to here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 ends at about the same spot. I'm now going to tie a foot rope knot using these 4 ends. We begin our doubled foot rope knot with a crown knot around our gaucho braid. Grab an end, pass it counterclockwise over the next end. The next end, counterclockwise over the next end. Next end, counterclockwise over the next end. And our final end passes into the opening created by the first end. Tied correctly, you get a square-shaped crown knot. So 4 ends means a square shape. To continue out of our square shape, grab one of the ends, pass it under the next end, like this, then double up this end here on its inner side, traveling into the opening here. So that's one end out of the way. Grab the next end, do the same thing. Under the next end, then double up this end here on its inner side, traveling into the same opening as it does. So, quite simple. Grab the next end, under your next end, or should I say two, then double up this strand here, again traveling into the same opening as the first strand. So, like this, we are now left with two ends to choose from. We went in here on the inner side, so the outer one is unused. Travel under the next end, then follow this strand here. So under this strand as well, doubling up the strand on its inner side, traveling into the same opening as it does, so under these two strands. We are almost done with our foot rope knot. It looks quite nice. We just need to finish it up. Each end is going to double up a strand below it, passing over these two strands, then up through the center of the knot. Super easy, and finishes the knot in a clean way. Your end, over to doubling up this bottom strand and traveling up through the center of the knot. Next end, over two, up through the center, last of our ends, over two, up through the center, like this. Our double foot rope knot is done. It looks nice. To tighten it up, as in with our previous knot here, start with strands coming into the knot, pull the slack through the knot into one of the ends. Choose another strand, so maybe this one here, do the same thing. So just tighten up your knot as much as you can. So with the knot tightened up, we can trim these four ends. Pull on the end as much as you can, trim. Pull, trim. Four ends done, four ends to go. With these four, we're going to be tying a diamond knot. I'm next going to line up my remaining four strands to about the same point. So, somewhere around here near the handle, so that I can place my diamond knot. So this end at the back needs to be worked further towards the front. Let's say maybe here. So these three ends are here. This one is a bit too further to the front. So I'm going to work this end under here instead, just to line up my ends to about the same point. As I've mentioned, there are really no rules. As long as the end result looks nice, you're pretty much good to go. Tighten everything up as much as you can. We're now going to continue with our diamond knot. We're covering this part here between the handle and the foot rope knot using our diamond knot. We start off by grabbing our four ends and doing a single turn around our section here. This results in four ends here on the bottom right and four wrapping turns through which we're going to weave our four ends. Grab your first end, travel under over, under over. The second end does exactly the same sequence, but starting under our first end. Under over, under over. The third end, same thing, under the previous end, so the second one, then over, under, over. Our final end, same thing, under the previous end, so under the third end, then over, under, over. Each end traveled under, over, reaching the left side. Grab one of the ends, pass it under the top end, then double up a strand coming out of the braid. So, over, under, over. Grab the next end, pass it under the top end, double up a strand coming out of the braid. So over, under, over. The next end, same thing, under the top end, double up the strand coming out of the braid. So over, under, over. Final end passes under an already used end, and doubles up the strand coming out of the braid. So over, under, over. We are at basically our last step. Each strand is exiting the knot with an over. We are going to re-enter the knot under 2, continuing over 2, under 2, and finishing over 2. Grab the next end, repeat. So we start under 2, we then continue over 2, under 2, finishing over 2. Next end, under 2, over 2, under 2, finishing over 2. Final end, same thing. Under 2, continuing over 2, under 2, finishing over 2. So this is our knot. To finish this side of the knot, grab each of your ends, pass it under the knot to the other side. Finally, tighten up your knot. Start at the strands coming into the knot from the braid. Run the slack through the knot into the ends. Finally, I'm going to tie another gaucho pattern diamond knot here at the transition between the star knot and the gaucho braid, just to cover this section and hide it out of sight. I'm going to introduce 2 cords. Each is a bit over 2 feet long. Run them through your braid at the start. Even out the 2 ends of your strand. And the second of the strands, again at the start of the braid, run it through, even out the 2 ends. So I again have 4 ends to work with, and I can begin my diamond knot. This diamond knot here is done exactly the same way as the first one, so we begin by gathering up our 4 ends, we line them up, one next to the other, and wrap around once around our braid, resulting in 4 wrapping turns. Pick up your first end, pass it under over, the second end, same sequence, but starting under our first end. Under over, under over, the third end, same sequence, starting under the second end, so under over, under over. The final fourth end, same sequence, starting under the third end, so under, over, under, over. We continue by grabbing one of the ends, passing it under the top end, and doubling up this strand here. Over, under, over. The next end, same thing. Under the top end, double up the strand above. Over, under, over. Next end, under the top end, double up the strand above. Over, under, over. Final end passes under an already used end, then doubles up the strand above. Over, under, over. Our pretty much final pass. Our strands are exiting over, we are re-entering under. Starting under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. Next strand, same thing. Under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. Next end, same thing. Under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. Final end. Again, same thing. Under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. On the left, to finish up, we simply grab each of our ends and pass it under and through the knot. All the way to the right side. So each end exits over 2, then passes under the knot to the right side. That's our knot. Tighten it up. Starting with the strands, coming into the knot, pull the slack through the knot into one of the ends. Do this with all 4 of your strands, and your knot is going to be tightened up. Finally, trim the 4 ends, as close to the knot as possible, and you are done. So if we take a look at the finished project, our globe knot, star knot, diamond knot, gaucho braid, foot rope knot, diamond knot, and our beautiful flat braid. Quite a few techniques. It's not the easiest project out there, but well, you can be proud of yourself after completing such a task. Thank you very much for joining me in this tutorial, and I hope to see you in my future ones. See ya next time.